Hello everyone and welcome to another News Coolum video. In this plug side chat, as I'm next to a DC fast charger, charging at about 44 kilowatts right now, um, I wanted to do a quick video talking about some of my tips for maximizing your trip speed. Now, I know I recognize that this isn't something that everyone is even going to be interested in doing, but it does seem to be a hang up with certain individuals saying that trip speeds just aren't acceptable in electric vehicles right now. And I wanted to kind of give my experiences because they've been sort of contrary to that. Um, for example, my regular 500-mile trip that I have to make to see my family, driving time is about 8 hours, regardless of what vehicle you're in. So if you're someone who, as they like to say, can splash and dash, you're looking at about minimum 8.5 hours. And that's if you don't run into traffic, you don't run into road incidents, basically slowdowns. You might be able to make it in about 8.5 hours. Uh, with gasoline powered cars, my typical time was closer to about 9 hours because I would usually stop for dinner. You know, leaving from work and driving for 8.5 hours without getting anything to eat was never really that appealing to me. So with the Bolt EV, because I get to maximize that time that I would normally be eating anyway, uh, I really actually only add about 30 minutes to an hour on top of that. So my typical trip time for this 500-mile trip is between 9.5 to 10 hours. It can be longer depending on the circumstances. Um, but again, so I wanted to just sort of give my some of my tips. Now, most of them are universal, but just upfront disclaimer, some of them really aren't going to be useful unless you have a vehicle that's roughly as capable as the Bolt EV, just because it has a few specific advantages over most other electric vehicles, um, and really they're basically it's the charging speed, which uh, it can charge faster than all the non-Teslas except for the Kia Soul right now and the Hyundai Ioniq EV. But even then, that's really not that big of a deal because right now most of the limitation is in the network itself, with only 125 amp 50 kilowatt chargers. The other thing is the efficiency, and I've noted this before, but um, I've seen the efficiency at freeway speeds up to 70 to 75 miles an hour. The Bolt EV is very equivalent to the first generation Volt, which is a very aerodynamic car and fairly fuel efficient, as even at freeway speeds. So that in combination with the charging speed gives it, you regain more miles per hour of charge. And then the other thing is the range. And what the range allows you to do is bridge gaps where you otherwise wouldn't be able to without stopping at a much slower charger, and not necessarily have to slow down um, when you're bridging longer gaps between chargers. And those are very important points, and I'll get to that later. And then of course, um, that range also allows you to skip chargers that you might not be able to skip in other electric vehicles, which reduces your sloth time, which is another thing that I'll get to later. But just in general, I kind of tried to distill down some of my key tips and tricks for maintaining a fast trip speed, and these are I try to make them as universal as possible. So the first one is just know your route. You can use map programs, you can use plug shares, trip planner, um, but nothing really replaces knowing your route. And a perfect example of it is the situation I'm in right now, where I decided to go to one particular charger, had it mapped out in my GPS, and it turns out that the clip was broken, so the charger wouldn't actually lock in. and wouldn't charge. So I had to know what my other options were and where I would be able to go. And of course, it helps you target the chargers that are most accessible and the fastest, right? But just in general, knowing your route means that you're not going to be fumbling around looking for places to recharge. You'll know where you want to stop based on what you want to do when you stop. Um, the other thing is to have your payment options set or ready to go, right? So make sure your accounts are set up, your apps are set up. I keep my I keep all of my ID cards or my RFID cards here, uh, just so they're ready when I show up at a DC fast charger. I swipe my card and I go. The other thing is to check the locations beforehand. And actually, I screwed this up, which is, why it cost me easily 15 to 20 minutes on my trip this time, because someone had noted that the charger that I went to was broken. Now, unfortunately, PlugShare didn't list it as being repaired or offline, but I should have looked at it closer. uh, the other thing is, and this is the one that I think tricks people or trips people up the most, is don't drive slow. So a lot of times people think, oh, if I drive slow, I can stretch out my miles. But think about it when you're charging, even if you're using a 20 kilowatt charger, uh, you're driving 70 to 80 miles an hour, you're going to be recouping range at that charger as fast as you were burning it off. So, really, you want to drive as fast as you can legally and safely drive. Um, and with the 50 kilowatt chargers or faster, you're recouping 200 miles in an hour of charge, or more or less. And so there's no reason to drive slow. Drive with the flow of traffic, and you'll get faster trip speeds as a result, even though you're being less efficient. Uh, the the other thing is, try to prioritize rural chargers. And what I mean by that is the chargers that I've noticed most often occupied are those in metropolitan areas, and those that, near cities, basically. And the reason for that is that's where the densest ownership is, but also a majority of the EVs on the road right now are still short range electric vehicles. People don't usually take them on long trips, and people in rural areas usually don't own them. So what I've found is when I'm 100 miles or more away from a metropolitan area, the number of electric vehicles I see diminishes greatly. So right now, a lot of our stations, we don't have a high level of concentration of public charging stations. So even one or two electric vehicles would be enough to make you have to find a new station or wait. And so if you can prioritize those that are out of the way, uh, they're less likely to be occupied, more likely to be open. Um, the other thing is to drive off peak travel times. And that's where a majority of my travel is done. Uh, this is a Thursday. I left work at 3:30 p.m., right? And I saw one electric vehicle on the road or near a charger. So, and that's so far. I mean, I still have one more charge stop before I get home, but uh, it's also 10:30 at night. It's very unlikely that I'm going to see anyone else. So, uh, off-peak travel also ensures that the chargers are going to be open. Um, Also, don't be afraid to charge past 55%. This is kind of Bolt EV specific, but um, you have what's called Sloth Time. Every time you stop at a charger, it's 10, 15 minutes between getting off the freeway, getting to the charger, activating the charger, unplugging the charger, driving back to the freeway. All of that is slop time. And The Bolt EV in particular will charge at an average of about 42 kilowatts up to about 70 to 75% battery. So there's no reason to stop your charge just because it's tapered down to 100 amps, right? Just keep charging, because if that means you get to skip an extra stop later on, you actually save a lot more time. Even if that extra stop you were charging at a full 56 kilowatts, it almost doesn't matter, because the time it took to stop um, really slowed the effective rate of that charge session. And then ultimately, it's just be flexible, right? If you're driving for speed, you want to have a goal, but at the same time, you just kind of have to go with the flow. And unfortunately, things happen. You just have to accept them. So I wanted to go faster this trip. I wanted to have a pretty good trip time, but I had a 10 to 15 mile an hour headwind. There's road construction. One of the chargers was broken. I forgot something that I needed to drive back to my apartment for, so I didn't even leave with the full charge. Things happen, but you can still try to maximize your time given what you have available. But anyway, I hope you found this helpful. If you did, if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. It helps out the channel. Uh, Let me know any of your tips and tricks for your fastest trip times, and maybe the average speeds that you like to hit. So, I like to try and see if I can maintain over 50 mile an hour average trip speed, including all charging stops. So, let me know, and have a good one.